Hello, welcome. This is episode 29 of Spilling the Green Beans, my live gardening show where I share with you my green secrets to inspire you to start growing your own vegetables. I am your host, Emily, creator of Easy Urban Gardening, the system for growing your own vegetables on a balcony or terrace in town. Thank you for spending time with me today when I talk about watering techniques. Growing vegetables can seem daunting and hard work, and I share with you my green secrets, the most crucial techniques to make it fun and easy. You'll also learn how to take advantage of the broad health benefits of gardening and how to cook delicious meals with your own vegetables. I am spilling the green beans. And today we're going to have a good look in how to best water your vegetables. It's going to be low, slow, warm, and stingy. Yes, let me explain that a little bit more. First, low. So, low actually means that you water your plants as low near to the ground as possible. So low at the stem, near the ground. This is, first of all, it's a very efficient way of watering. Of course, you're not spoiling lots of water. I mean, if you have your plant here and you are going to put the hose like that, well, first of all, you're spraying a lot of water, which is actually all, spoiling a very, very important resource. So watering low is efficient, but even more important, plants don't really like wet leaves. So you might ask now, what? I mean, normally they would only grow if it rains. That's correct. But especially in summer, we have a lot of vegetables that actually don't mind a little bit more dry periods and sunny periods. And there is something different. Rainwater is also kind of like it's falling on the plants in a different way than with a hose. I'm not saying about this kind of like torrential rainstorms that you can have in summer as well, but in general, it's more gentle. And it's kind of like hard to explain, but next time, have a look in your garden and go really out and do some, research. After it's been raining, if you go into the garden and you inspect your plants, the leaves aren't really soaking wet. Somehow, this rainwater, I don't know, it flows easier off or something like, I don't know, maybe it's also just the force behind it or the shape of the drops. I'm not a physicist, so I'm not really sure, but there is something about rain that doesn't make the leaves of a plant as wet as when you put on the force of the hose on it. So if you water your plants yourself, first of all, you only water them, of course, if it's not raining. So actually, you also give your plants that moment of dry, sunny, and probably warm weather. So keep it that way. Let them thrive in those conditions. So you water low, as close as near to the soil as possible. Don't water too tight around the stem. Don't make like just only a little circle around the stem. Because if you make the circle a little bit wider, you kind of like stimulate the plant to grow a wider root system. So if you only if you only pour some water every day, like really near the stem, the root system stays narrow like that. And you actually want it to widen because that makes it easier for the plant to absorb all the nutritional value it needs from the soil. So that's how and why we water low. Then another thing we do is we water slow, or preferably you should water slow. And that's, of course, first of all, especially after sowing, you want to water slow because otherwise you kind of like you flush away the seeds. You have been poking holes in the soil. First of all, you have made it really, really nice, loose and airy. And then you poke holes in the soil. You put the seeds in there. You cover the holes, but you're not kind of like, not really poking every little soil sand grain back in its position. So there are kind of like air bubbles in the soil after sowing. And if you flush water, if you put the hose on it, you can just imagine that those air pockets, they fill up with water, and then it all flushes really away because of the force of the hose that is behind it. And that actually also flushes away your seeds. That, of course, is a problem. First of all, because within Easy Urban Gardening, we sow according to a very nice, neat grid. So every single plant in the end will get the space it needs. And it also makes it easier for us gardeners to distinguish between plant and weeds. As I always say, everything that is not in line with your grid is not a vegetable plant, or it is one that is flushed away and it doesn't belong there. So especially after sowing, it's really, really important that you water slow, and preferably even with a little cup instead of with a hose. I know you have hoses where you can gradually change the force of the water, but after sowing, my experience is that even the most gentle way a hose waters is still relatively forceful. So you better water with a little cup. It can be a tea mug, it can be a teacup, it can be a little plastic container. It can be pretty much anything that you can control in a very slow way of pouring the water exactly where you want to have it without flushing everything away. In general, even after sowing, of course, when your seedlings are still tiny, exactly the same applies. You want to water slowly because otherwise, they all fall down, or they're still really fragile. But even when your plants are big, watering slowly improves the absorption of the water by the soil. Imagine, you can just imagine, the difference between a gentle, warm summer rain and a torrential flood. Well, we all know that if it's raining for a longer period of time, but slowly, gently, without too much force, the water is absorbed by the soil easily, and it's kind of like, we don't have any flooding. But if rain is poured out of heaven by the buckets, we all know what that brings. Water can't flush away quick enough. It won't be absorbed quick enough, and everything floods. That kind of situation you have in the garden as well. So if you water with less force, so slowly, gently, the water will be absorbed in your garden better than when you put the full force of the hose on your vegetable garden. So that's slow. Then I said warm. It's kind of like in general, because vegetables grow better when the temperatures are warmer. And those warmer temperatures, of course, applies to air, but it also applies to the soil temperature. And to keep the soil temperature as high as possible, you don't want to flush in ice cold water. So it's also better if the water isn't too cold. And of course, doesn't mean it has to be warm. Like for your senses, of course, we are a little bit warmer. We have warmer bodies than the plants in our garden. So what feels nice and warm for us is a little bit too warm for your vegetables, but it definitely shouldn't be ice cold. So a good way to realize that is to put a big bucket in your garden. Kind of like I have a big, I think it's roughly 30 liters, maybe 35 liters, big bucket, big plastic. In my case, it's a red one. Plastic bucket that I have in between two of my raised beds. It's just standing there and it's collecting rainwater. And that's the water I use to water my plants. And last week we spoke about tomatoes. I told that they are really, really picky. They're peculiarly picky when it comes to the temperature of the water. So the rainwater I collect is always first, it is reserved for my tomato plants. If they don't need it, I absolutely do use it for the rest of my plants as well. And in summer, as you might know, I have a dog, by now 3 years old, Dutch herder, and he loves splashing around in the water. So we have a little splash pool for him as well. It's kind of like puddle pool thingy. And of course, in summer, we have water in there as well, which I also use for my plants because, of course, it's dangerous for him if temperatures are up and the water is still standing water. If it's there for 4 days or something, then we have all sorts of risks for bacteria and things like that. So we have to empty it often enough. And that's why I also use that to water the plants. And even though that one is mainly filled with normal water from the tap, it's there already at least one day when I start using it. And that means it's not as cold anymore as that it would flow straight out of your tap. Now I'm talking about warm. I already mentioned you don't want it to be too warm. It's not if it's warm for you. If it feels warm for you, it's too warm for your plants. And in the case you do use a hose, be careful, because if that hose catches sunlight, direct sun, even if it's only like an hour a day or a few hours a day, the water inside that hose, it heats up incredibly quickly. So make sure you really, really test the temperature from the water when you use your hose. Then when it comes to warm-ish water, let's call it that way, warm-ish. Your vegetable, the more summer loving or heat loving vegetables, the more they appreciate warm-ish water. So all the really, really summer vegetables, tomatoes, zucchini, cucumber, pumpkin, melon, all those aubergine, all those vegetables that really, really, really only thrive in nice warm temperatures, they really, really, really don't like ice cold water. So if you have to think about, okay, how am I going to apply or how am I going to allocate the amount of rainwater that I have versus the water from the hose? Pick your summer vegetables first when watering with rainwater and reserve the hose or the tap water, the colder water, for your vegetables that don't mind cooler temperatures. I'm talking about beets, carrots, lettuce, spinach, beans, most herbs. They aren't that peculiar. They don't really, really mind. But as I said, tomatoes definitely don't want cold water. But your zucchini, your pumpkin, your cucumber, your aubergine, your peppers, they will appreciate you a little bit more just because you don't water them with ice cold water. So then the last thing I want to talk about when watering is that you should water stingy. What do I mean with that? I mean that, first of all, easy urban gardening is very focused on not spoiling resources. We don't want to waste anything, neither do we want to waste water. So we already talked about when watering slow with a cup, that is a very good way to prevent spoiling water. Watering low is also a way of waste prevention, so to say, of you just, spraying away water that doesn't really do the job it's supposed to do. But it's also by watering stingy, because actually your plants don't need water every single day in general. I'm not talking about a heat wave in summer with almost 35 degrees Celsius upwards temperatures. A garden like mine that is like baking in the sun from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. or even longer. Then in summer, of course, you do need to water them at least once a day. But on average, they don't need water every single day. So it is important to realize that, because pampering, which I call it, just, mindlessly watering your plants every day, or even having a computerized drip system that just waters every day or multiple times a day without you thinking about it or without thinking it through, it's kind of like pampering of your plants, and pampering doesn't make strong, big plants. Your vegetable will definitely grow stronger and bigger if you do not pamper them too much. And one way of building some resilience is to water them only when they are thirsty. Now, don't panic and don't immediately say, oh, I can't do that because I have no clue when my veggies are thirsty. Honestly, believe me, you will very quickly learn to recognize thirsty veggies as long as you stick to our daily routine we talked about in episode 14. So if you didn't make a daily routine, or you don't have one, or you're new to the show, check out episode 14 about a daily routine. If you stick to that one, you will recognize them really, really quickly. But as long as you are not really sure, there is a method. There's a very easy method, of course, to always check. Just check. So stick your finger in the soil before watering, and roughly halfway. So, go roughly halfway near the bigger veggies. And of course, near a seedling, be very careful and just put a little bit of your finger in the soil. But as long as the soil is still moist, your plants don't need watering yet. So that's a way to be relatively sure about, do I have to water or not? But I promise you, within a few weeks, you will recognize the thirsty plants immediately when you step outside. I mean, they just look a little bit more in need. They maybe dropped their leaves just so slightly, or the flowers aren't as proudly standing up anymore. Those are kind of like the very first signs of a plant being a bit thirsty, needing a nice gulp of water. But as long as they look fresh and bright and proud and strong, don't water them. Just don't do it. Let them be. Nature is very, very resilient. We talked about that as well. I think it was episode 25 after the hailstorm I had. They will survive. They absolutely won't die from no water one day. But they might even die quicker from overwatering than from underwatering. So that is how we easy urban gardeners water our vegetables? Low, slow, warm-ish, and stingy. For now, so that was it for this week. That's all about watering. I want to thank you for spending time with me in the garden, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And next week, it will all be about bees, butterflies, and birds. So we're going to talk about those friends in your garden you definitely want to have. So I hope to see you next week. Did you enjoy this episode of Spilling the Green Beans? Then please share, subscribe, give a review, give a comment, leave a comment, ask your questions, whatever. Make sure that as many people can enjoy the show as possible. I see you next week. Bye.